Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Are you thinking of making a move to Tucson and you're curious as to what the cost of living is going to cost you or if it compares to where you're currently living? Well, today we're going to do a deep dive in all of the cost of living in Tucson. That's everything from housing, transportation, groceries, utilities, everything. It's going to give you a really good idea of what it would cost to live here. Now, it's been a little over a year since I've done an update of these, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things are at currently right now in 2024. And then besides that, we're also going to take a look at 3 different places of where people are either moving from or also some similar places to kind of compare to Tucson, so you can get an idea of what the affordability factor is or maybe the non-affordability factor. But we're going to go ahead and take a deep dive, so let's get right into it. All right, so today we're actually going to be using this really great site called PayScale, and it's going to give you really a good idea of if you're looking to move to Tucson or kind of anywhere in general, or just something kind of fun to play around with to see what it costs to live in a certain area. It'll really base everything off of the national average, and then you kind of go from there and you really see if this is going to be something that you're able to afford, or if you can live within your means, or if it's less than what you're used to, or if it costs more to live somewhere. So really good site. It's called PayScale, and right now, so I typed in cost of living. I went through and I'm going to be comparing it, and we'll go ahead later on down the video and compare it between 3 different cities as well. Currently right now in 2024, Tucson is 4% higher than the national average. So it's based off of certain various factors such as career, average salary. Just for today's video, I'm basing it off of a really easy number, and I'm just going to say the salary that you're working with is $100,000 a year. So it's going to be basing it off of that throughout the entire video. So as you can see right here, again, Tucson is 4% higher than the national average. Housing is up 6%, utilities are down 2%, and groceries are up 4%. And I kind of think that's the norm across the United States right now, just with inflation and how things have been going recently in the past few years with everything. So unfortunately, cost of everything is a little bit up. We're going to take a scroll down. This line right here, this black line, is indicating the national average across the board. So overall, basing it, Tucson is 4% higher than the national average. Housing is 6% higher. Utilities is actually down 2%. Groceries is 4% higher, and transportation is 7% higher. So we're going to go down further just to give a better idea. Housing, utilities, and transportation. Now, the median home price is, from this site, it's $475,000. This might be a little bit off because I just checked the other day, and as of March, the stats for the median home price in Tucson was actually $364,000. And so that might be a little bit more accurate. It's basing it off of the Tucson Association of Realtors. So it's really the local database. So something to kind of keep in mind. The site might not be the most accurate, but $364,000 was the median average home sale in Tucson. So keep that in mind. The median rent in Tucson is $1,446 a month. Average energy bill is $172.93, which, that's really kind of depending case by case. Mine typically in the summer can get up to that, but it really depends. If you're living in a smaller home, it probably won't get up to that. So it's all case by case basis. Cell phone bill is averaging around $186 a month. Again, case by case basis, but this seems pretty normal and standard across the board. And then gas is $3.63 a gallon, which this is definitely what it is right now, currently in April 2024, except for the median home price. That one I do kind of have a little issue with. Everything else seems to be around that price or so. And then with the median home price and just with, homes in general in Tucson, starting at that 364 number, the 364 median number, that's really kind of, what things are selling for. And once you kind of get up into that higher price point, with nicer homes in the 500s, 600s, you're able to find houses that you're not having to do as much work with. And yes, you can find some really great homes under that price, but they move very quickly still. So something to keep in mind. Now let's go ahead and go down to food and groceries. And for my household, I definitely do the grocery shopping, so I'll be able to see if this is pretty accurate to what things are costing here in Tucson. Again, it is 4% higher than the national average. So a loaf of bread around $4 seems about right. Gallon of milk, $2.52. Carton of eggs, and depending, if you're buying organic or anything like that, but standard carton of eggs is $2.34. I've seen it a little bit more expensive, but pretty standard. Bunch of bananas, $3.49. And then a hamburger, $5.33. Seems a little steep. I don't necessarily purchase hamburgers like fast food or anything, so that's something probably you'd have to do a little bit more research, but that one seems a little steep. Let's go ahead and go down to healthcare. This can be tricky, and this I think is a little bit, national standards. So this is something I think might be a little bit off, especially with the RX drugs that we're gonna see, but doctor's visit, $126, sounds pretty close. Dentist, $109, I definitely think that's pretty on par. Optometrist, $119. I definitely have seen it a little bit more expensive, but that's pretty close. RX drugs is $466. I think that's kind of, again, national-wise, we're kind of having a little bit of a crisis with that. So depending on if you have insurance or if you use GoodRx, can definitely be a lot less expensive, but that's definitely very pricey. And then vet visits, $61, depending on what you're getting. This seems pretty accurate as well. So again, cost of living of Tucson, it is a little bit higher than the national average. I will say that, just seeing with the housing and everything, I do still think for a lot of major cities and a lot of cities on the West Coast for that, the median home price and the affordability of living is still really, really great here. And, just again, past few years, prices for everything has gone up across the board everywhere nationally. So for what I've been seeing, throughout the United States, I would say Tucson is still pretty great for what you're paying for housing, groceries, all of that, definitely a good option. Now let's go ahead and compare some of the other cities. But before we do that, I did also want to mention that I am a licensed real estate agent. So if you are looking to move to Tucson or if you have questions, I'd love to set up a one-on-one call with you. My number is going to pop up on the video right here. You can screenshot it and we can either set up a time to chat on Zoom or we can text, call, email, whatever is easiest for you. I'd love to help you with any questions you might have. Now let's go ahead and compare some of the other cities to Tucson. All right, we're going to go ahead and compare 3 cities to Tucson. Now, the first one we're going to compare is going to be Scottsdale, Arizona. So that's within the Phoenix metropolitan area, about 2 hours away from Tucson. But, a lot of people do compare or try to figure out if they want to be in more of the Phoenix area compared to Tucson. So just to give you an idea of the cost of living. Then we're going to look at San Diego. I do have a lot of clients that move here from California and Southern California. So really basing it off of San Diego just to give a good idea. And then we're going to compare it to Portland, Oregon. And there are a lot of people who do compare Tucson and Portland. I've never been to Portland, but certain aspects, I guess, of Tucson, and I think more of the artsy inner city Tucson is very similar to Portland, but we'll kind of compare that and go from there. We're going to go ahead and switch over to Rent Cafe. Now, this site is going to give us a really awesome comparison of the cities. And again, this is a fun website to play around with, whether you're looking to move or anything, or if you're bored. It's just kind of fun to see what things are costing elsewhere. So let's go ahead and type in Scottsdale and then compare to Tucson. And again, we are going to just work with that $100,000 annual salary. If you were to maintain that $100,000 salary and you're moving either from Scottsdale to Tucson, it's 9% lower. So to maintain the life you were living in Scottsdale, you would only need to be making around $91,000 compared to $100,000. And yes, there's some differences there, but that's kind of everywhere. It's for you to pick and choose what you like, what you don't like. And we are looking at the average monthly rent. So Scottsdale compared to Tucson, it is 38% lower to rent in Tucson. So your average monthly rent in Scottsdale is going to cost you around $2,100 a month. In Tucson, it's around $1,300 a month or so. And then scrolling down, your average home price in Scottsdale is going to be $746,000, while in Tucson, again, forget this number, it is $364,000. So definitely looking at a huge difference. So cost of housing is definitely higher here, looking at about a 38% lower to live in Tucson. So utilities is going to be 10% higher in Scottsdale. So energy is around $202. Tucson is around $198. Phone is actually, from this website, it shows Scottsdale is lower. And so it's 41% higher in Tucson, which is pretty interesting. I don't know necessarily what that would entail. Food. Now this is showing that it is somewhat comparable in certain areas, a little bit lower, a little bit higher. So just something to kind of play around with. 20% higher in Tucson for bananas, which is kind of interesting. And then healthcare, it is 13% lower in Tucson, so that's a pretty good difference there. Doctor's visits in Scottsdale is averaging around $146, while in Tucson it's $125. Cost of ibuprofen is $1 more in Tucson, which is kind of funny. Transportation in Tucson, it is saying that it's higher. Again, this is a little bit more picky choosy. I would say right now, just driving back and forth between Tucson and Scottsdale, these don't seem too accurate. I think it is the price of gas, at least, is a little bit lower in Tucson traditionally. Goods and services, and that's stuff like your miscellaneous day-to-day. Haircuts in Scottsdale seem to be a little bit lower. It's a little bit higher in Tucson. Yoga is higher in Scottsdale. A movie ticket, lower in Tucson. So again, take this with a grain of salt. It might be the same, it might be different. And then income. So income in Tucson is 51% lower. So averaging around, the median household income in Scottsdale is around $97,000. In Tucson, it's around $48,000. And again, it is less expensive to live in Tucson, so you kind of have to weigh those out there. So let's go ahead and jump into our next city, which we're going to analyze, and we're going to take a look at Portland. So again, basing everything off $100,000 salary, in order to maintain that, if you were living in Portland making $100,000, you moved to Tucson, you would need $85,000 or so to maintain that same lifestyle. So about 14% lower, which is pretty good. I'm not saying you need to make lower, but you can kind of live a little bit better here with that yearly salary. And then with housing, so buying and renting, average rent, you're looking at 25% lower. So what they're stating on this website is average rental is around $1,700 a month in Portland. And then in Tucson, it's saying compared to around $1,300 or so in Tucson. So about 25% lower. And then if you were to purchase a home, that is actually going to be 32% lower, which is pretty huge. So median home prices in Oregon, in Portland, is around $701,000. And then in Tucson, again, this number is a little bit off. This one states $474. Last month, our median home price in Tucson was $364, so that's even better. It's a lot lower, more than half. And then mortgage rate. This is all based off of lender and your rates shopping. So per state, it's saying that Tucson or Arizona is 5% higher than Portland. Then jumping to utilities, it is saying that Tucson would be 6% higher. So energy in Portland is $182 a month. In Tucson, it's $198 a month, so a little bit higher. And then phone is 1% higher, so $190 in Portland, $193 in Tucson. Now let's look at food. So this is showing that it's 5% lower in Tucson, which is pretty good. Steak, not a huge difference here, about 3 cents. The big one is going to be probably, They're all pretty similar. Coffee's a little bit more expensive in Portland, but just giving you an idea of pricing, somewhat similar for the most part. Healthcare, Tucson is 18% lower than Portland. So your doctor's visit in Portland, they're averaging out to $188 a visit, while in Tucson it's $125. Your dentist is costing around $115 in Portland, while in Tucson it's $101. Let's jump to transportation. Transportation is about 14% lower, and that is actually mainly coming from tires. So tires are definitely more expensive in Portland, while gas is pretty similar. So, if you're having to replace your tires every 3 years or so, it's a little bit more expensive there. Goods and services. So it's actually saying that Tucson is 2% higher. So besides what's going to be costing more, newspapers. So if you're still purchasing newspapers, they are 82% higher in Tucson. I'm not sure how many people are still purchasing those, but that's a big one. And then boy jeans is also 51% higher. So Portland, you can get some jeans for $23, while in Tucson, it's averaging around $34. Other than that, your basic necessities like haircuts, it's lower in Tucson, almost about $12 or so. And then, if you're taking yoga or workout classes, it's about $5 to $6 cheaper in Tucson. And then let's talk about income. So median household income in Portland is around $78,000 a year, and in Tucson it's $48,000, depending all on the career and everything. But for the most part, all in all, it is a lot less expensive housing-wise to live here, so that all kind of falls into line of the affordability. So something to weigh in mind if you are comparing the two places. Let's go ahead and look at San Diego next. All right, lastly, let's compare San Diego to Tucson. I have a lot of clients that have moved from Southern California and all over California, out of California to Tucson, and they really love it here. They love the affordability here, and that's just, in general, California's gotten pretty expensive. It's kind of always been that way, but especially the past few years, prices have jumped up. So again, basing it off $100,000 salary. So if you were making that in San Diego, living off of that, off of $100,000, it's going to be 27% lower to live here in Tucson. So to kind of keep up with that same lifestyle, you would only need to make about $72,000 a year to live in Tucson and still maintain that lifestyle as you were in San Diego. Housing. Now this is kind of like a no-brainer. It's definitely way more expensive to live there compared to it's 56% lower to live here in Tucson. So average monthly rent in San Diego is around $2,900 a month, while in Tucson it's around $1,300. So that's a huge difference, massive, massive difference. Majority of your pay is going to that monthly rent. And then mortgage pricing. So if you are looking at the median home price in Southern California, in San Diego, about $1 million, a little bit higher than $1 million. And then again, scratch this number, it's actually $364,000 median home price here in Tucson. So way less than, it's probably around like a 60% difference of the cost of living, way more affordable here in Tucson. And then again, mortgage rates, these are all kind of case by case difference depending on. So a little bit higher here in Tucson, but depending on who you're using, you can get lower rates for the most part. Average energy bill in San Diego is around $223, while in Tucson, it's around $198. And then phone bill, it's supposedly a little bit cheaper in San Diego, so about $180 a month, while it's $193 here in Tucson. And then food. It is 9% lower here in Tucson, which is kind of, standard of what you would expect. There seem, at least when I visited, there is a pretty similar basis of food in Southern California, and I think that's why people really relate to Southern Arizona and Southern California, is they're pretty similar in lifestyles and everything, and the food and everything you're getting there. I do think we have better Mexican food here, but don't want to start any fights. And then if we are scrolling to healthcare, about 14% lower here in Tucson. So your doctor's visits there are going to be $132, while here in Tucson it's $125. Dentist is gonna cost you about $20 more in San Diego. Transportation, looking at tires, a little bit more expensive in San Diego. And then gasoline, more expensive as well. So about $4.68 a gallon, while around $4.05 here in Tucson. And then goods and services, 4% isn't a huge difference. The most big thing is probably gonna be your beauty salons. Again, we have these newspapers that are really killing it here, but again, I don't know many people who are paying that much for a newspaper in general. And then looking at income. So, median household income in San Diego is $89,000, while in Tucson, it's around $48,000. So again, the income is definitely lower here, but the cost of living in general is also way lower compared to San Diego. So definitely something to keep in mind. Well, that wraps up the cost of living. I really encourage you, if you are looking to move here or just moving in general, play around with these websites. So that's PayScale and Rent Cafe. Play around with them because they might not be like 1000% accurate, but if you're looking to move and you're really used to your way of living and your income, it'll really kind of help you figure out where you can live, where you're wanting to live, if something is affordable or if it's absolutely not affordable. So definitely play around with it. But this was more so of a gist of what things are costing right now in Tucson and then comparing it to other places for 2024. I can always do another update halfway through or a little bit along the year so that you guys get a better idea, but this has generally been what the costs have been the past year-ish or so, but I hope it was helpful. Again, if you're looking to move, I definitely recommend doing a lot of research and also reach out to me. I'd love to set up a one-on-one call with you. We can text, call, email. I'd really love to help be your resource and just get you a good idea of what you'd like to do in Tucson and if you have any questions. Again, you can text, call, email me, but I hope this was helpful and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.